everyone, welcome back. Today I'll be doing a review of The Devouring by Simon Holt. This is book 1 in the Devouring trilogy, and it's a YA horror book. It came out in 2008. And it's the story of a high school girl named Reggie who lives with her father and her 8-year-old brother Henry. The mother's kind of like left about a year ago, kind of walked out in the family. No explanation as to why, and no one's heard from her since. So I'm wondering if we'll hear more about her character in the upcoming books or her reasoning behind that. But nevertheless, Reggie's kind of had to step up and take over some of the duties that her mom did, doing the laundry, the shopping, kind of watching out for Henry, reading bedtime stories, things like that. And in addition to that, she also has a part-time job at a used bookshop, which kind of specializes in horror, which is something Reggie just loves. She loves anything to do with horror stories, horror movies. It's just fascinating for her. And one day she's unpacking boxes, and she comes across this handwritten journal, and across the title page is written the words, The Devouring. And she's kind of intrigued by this. Is this, an author's notes for a potential book? And she kind of does some research, but doesn't see any publication of a book entitled The Devouring. So she decides to bring it home and kind of check into it a little bit further, and finds it really kind of interesting, and decides, she's kind of tired of what she's usually been reading to Henry at night. So kind of convinces him that, hey, you want to read something a little bit scary? And Henry's kind of, a little nervous about it, but decides, he wants to get into some of the things that his older sister's into, which is horror. So he says, yeah, go ahead. So she starts to read some of The Devouring to him, which is actually the first 4 pages, which is the prologue of this particular book, is the story that she reads to Henry. And I got to tell you, those first 4 pages creeped me out. So I can imagine what it did to this little 8-year-old. And to give you an idea, it talks about these evil demonic creatures called Devourers, and they inhabit human bodies on Starry Night, which is described as the darkest hours of the winter solstice. And within this book, she comes across this poem which she reads, and it's, "When dark creeps in and eats the light, bury your fears on Starry Night. For in the winter's blackest hours come the feasting of Devourers. No one can see it, the light they stole. Your body's here, but not your soul." So at this point, Henry starts to think, well, wait a minute, tomorrow night, Starry Night, and he's really freaking out. And Reggie's like, it's just a story, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a book. So she gets him kind of to calm down and stuff, but she's still kind of intrigued by it and everything. And she tells her best friend Aaron about it. And the next night he comes over, and they decide to do this whole kind of Bloody Mary thing, which, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's Bloody Mary is an urban legend. I heard about it on a sleepover when I was younger. And the whole thing is, if you go into a darkened room and stand in front of a mirror and chant Bloody Mary 3 times, this terrifying ghost will appear behind you and stuff. And there's no way in hell I will ever do that. But they decide to do something along that lines and decide to face their biggest fears on Starry Night. And for Reggie, that happens to be spiders. She is terrified of spiders, and I can extremely relate to that because I cannot stand the little creepy crawly things. So she lets the spider crawl all over her for about a minute and stuff. Aaron's biggest fear is being underwater. When he was younger, he was in some deep water, had his feet kind of washed out from under him, and nearly drowned. And again, I can severely relate to that because I had some very similar situation happen to me too. I went too far out in Lake Michigan. I couldn't actually swim. I was just playing around in the water, went too far out, kind of lost my footing and went under and had a difficult time getting back up, and I really started to panic, thought I was going to drown. So I am still afraid of water. So I could relate very well to his fears in this situation. So they both face their fears on Starry Night. Nothing happens. They laugh it off. Big joke, But something happens to Henry, and Reggie begins to believe that perhaps this isn't such an urban legend after all. He starts acting really strange, a bit evil, and now it's a race to figure out how are they going to save Henry's soul. They've got to track down, who wrote this book, where to come from, what can they do. And it's just a fast-paced from that point on, and there's lots of creepy images. They've got to face some horrible nightmares and fears. Really, really well-written book. I read this in such a short time. I think it was just a couple nights. I really like Reggie's character. She's very typical teen, you think, but she's got to go through some really tough stuff. First with her mother leaving and having this added responsibility, and now a fight for her younger brother's soul. Aaron is also a really good friend. He's been a bit of a wimp through most of his life, and here he's just comes to her back, and helps helps try and figure out what's going on. I thought the father's character was a bit underwhelming, you might say. He's barely in their lives. It seems like he's sort of checked out once the mother kind of left. He's just kind of buried himself in work and left a lot of the responsibility to Reggie. So I didn't like his character too much. Even when things start going kind of goofy at home and Henry and Reggie are fighting, you might say, quote unquote Henry, because it's not really Henry. And he says some things about his sister, and the father just takes it at face value. I'm like, this is an 8-year-old kid. Why are you believing him so much over the older daughter? And even when some of the things that he says about his sister seem a bit serious, you'd think he'd kind of try and find out more information. You know, he seemed to disappear for most of the book. So I'm wondering where that'll play out in the upcoming books. But I thought it was very, very well written, very good pacing, lots of creepiness. It definitely freaked me out. To say this put an impression on me is an understatement, because literally the night after I read this book, I was taking my dog out to go do her business before bed. And we have to kind of pass through our garage to go outside. And then on the way back in, I came across these 2 ginormous spiders. And I was like, are you kidding me? Right after reading this book, I had to see this? So, you know, squashed those, went in the house, and then settled in for bed. And that night I had a nightmare. And I was out walking my dog, and we had gotten caught in this torrential downpour. We had to take shelter for quite a while. And after it passed, we decided to make our way home. And we're going down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden my dog kind of goes off the sidewalk and starts walking across the lawn. And I'm like, oh, but there's these big, huge puddles, and it's getting deeper. I'm like, you're going to get soaked. And before I know it, my dog is literally underwater and just standing there, not moving. And I'm freaking out. And I rush up to her, and I go to pull her up, and I can't pull her out. She's stuck in the ground, like the suction. And finally I pull and pull, and I'm able to pop her loose. And she's coughing and spluttering, and I'm holding her up as high as I can. And before I know it, the water has now reached up here. And I'm looking all around, and all I see is water everywhere. And I'm thinking, oh my God, help, somebody help. You know, I could feel the water about to knock my feet out from under me. And then I wake up. And that moment I woke up, I thought, this stupid book is playing on my mind, you know. And so I'm like, okay, try and get back to sleep. Not 10 minutes later, my phone goes off with an alarm. And every night, almost religiously, I shut that phone off. But for some reason, that night, forgot to shut my phone off. So I go over to see what the alarm is, and it's a weather alert. I look at the weather alert. Warning, area flooding. And I'm like, I don't believe this. So, yeah, this book definitely freaked me out. I highly recommend this. It's really great for this time of year if you want a little creepiness in there. I can't wait to read the next 2. Although I may wait to read the next 2 till I get a little bit out of my system, but it was really, really well written. I'm going to give this one 5 stars. So hope you enjoyed the review. Definitely pick this one up. And thanks for watching.